We are very privileged to be joined today by Dr April Weiss of the Australian National University. April, thank you so much for joining us today.
That's a pleasure.
Thank
you for having me.
Could we maybe start by you just telling us a little bit about your mission here at ANU and the incredible feat that we're about to dive into?
Well, it started a long time ago. When I first went to a university, I was interested in helping them progress their learning approach, and at the time it was all about online learning. And I thought, how on earth does anyone make any change in an organization like this? Because it's never fully centralized, they're very heavily decentralized. And so I became focused on what do people need at a university and how do you make that change? And at the time I felt quite small and insignificant within the university structure. But that was my goal. Like, I didn't go in there to be, a great project manager or to go in and be, and that was my entry point into the universities, and go in to be, take on this role and that role. My goal was to, work out what it is people need and then work out how to make those changes.
It's just something interesting I picked up on there, finding out what people need, what the end user needs. I asked a similar question to a peer of yours from Queensland University recently, directly said, and do we know now what people need? His answer was no, absolutely. We still don't know 5 years down the road because of the disparity between person A and person B. Do you know that answer now? Do you know what individual users need, do you think? Or?
There isn't one answer.
There isn't one answer?
No. But when we are working on audiovisual, which we like to call learning space technology here, because AV is like, it's a point in time when there was only AV equipment. So when we're working on learning space technology, we like to gather together the people who are using the room, the people who are making decisions about the room, the people who will be representing others perhaps with accessibility, disability needs, and so on. Bring them all together. And recently we did this, and we had a rolling session across 3 days, not fully 3 days. First session was about what is possible in this room, what is technically possible and physically possible. And then from there it's like, what are you doing in this space? What will you be doing? What would you like to have in this space? And then we did this collaborative user requirements, and then what is it that you've seen before that you'd like to have? Now that should never limit us because technology is improving all the time, but we get it from the people who are using the rooms and using the spaces and are most impacted.
So do you find yourselves in those scenarios coming up with a lot of I guess either asks or requirements where you can do something, but then find yourself asking, should we do this? That's something I'm certainly hearing a lot from talking to people that are as in-depth into this as you are here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also we bring in people who are not necessarily like in the heart of the AV world. So we had our human-centered design people running the last session.
Right.
And one of them is an academic as well.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So there was a lot of discussion, and then we do take it away and work out, well, what can we do? Because we were very time limited.
Sure. So
the university is closing down, not closing down, but working on for hail remediation, a large center. It seats 1,200 people, and it's a concert hall. Yeah. And so all of those students who would normally go in for the larger classes now need to migrate somewhere else. Sure. So this is needed in a very short period of time. So what can we do? What are all the wishes? What can we do now? And what can we then bring in, maybe into the second semester?
I'd love to know more about your career path, certainly with the exceptional things that have been completed and achieved here at ANU. How did you find yourself in the audiovisual technology world?
Yeah, well, how far back do you want to go?
The beginning.
Yeah. High school, quite interested in technology.
Okay, so it was that early it began?
Yeah, not in AV itself, but in IT. And the high school I was at had one of the old original ENIAC computers and an absolute guru to teach us. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So, it started back then. And then when I went to university, again, it was I was looking at, well, what can we do with computers? I didn't do a computing degree, but I took courses as I could. And then my second degree was computing. My third, well, I'll get into the third degree later. But so, when I went to work in IT, I was interested in everything. So I would work in applications, I would work in infrastructure, I would work in multimedia, I would work, in all the different areas.
And do you think you steered your career, or do you think serendipity took over to a degree, or was it situational?
No, I think it is situational, because I always had that goal of how do you make the large changes in a large organization. I always had that interest in the application and in infrastructure. And then one day I'd been given a role in infrastructure,
right.
And with it came the AV area. So I was like, oh, okay, this is fun. And then that was the start of my working with AV. So I had that in RMIT for a very long time.
Indeed.
And, again, became very interested because it's so fundamental to the university. And it's what does the university need? From an individual's perspective, but when you have over 1,600 rooms with AV in it, how do you manage that? How do you maintain that?
Yeah, especially with the immense scale of variance in the university as well, which is something I'm only just coming to terms with now with looking at some of our customers. Of course there are laboratories, but as an outsider and a non-academic, I just wasn't aware of the broad spectrum of facilities that are in a place like this, and therefore the individual needs and the variance in needs. So that alone must have been a huge challenge.
Oh, it was. And because I did have, part of my background is in multimedia and online learning, people automatically said, oh, applications, infrastructure, multimedia, online learning, here, have AV. So, yeah.
So do you think, I won't go talk about the pandemic too much, but it obviously it forced change for every organization, if we're honest. Do you think the pandemic really opened the eyes of the rest of the commercial world to the things that people like yourself were already doing sort of 5 years ago to try and get ahead of what would be next in remote learning and a broad spectrum of spaces?
It certainly opened the university's eyes,
right?
Because I, was running the online learning program, and this university likes people to come in and work with the outstanding academics they have, and they like the students to be physically present.
Yeah.
So with online learning, I was challenged. Every time I had to do a budgetary uplift, they would always say, do we really need that? Do we really need as much of that as we have? And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, the university closed down over a 3-day period. All the students, all the staff were transferred to the online learning. So overnight, it just scaled up. And the university was able to then transfer. They had to get used to teaching this way, but at least the technology wasn't blocking them.
Sure.
So, yeah. And then, of course, people started to use Teams, they started to use Zoom, and then became very comfortable with talking to students anywhere in the world using the unified communication approach. So, yes, it did.
We talked a little bit about how your career pathway started. If you could use a magical teleportation device or time travel device, which we may be closer to inventing here recently, if you believe what CERN are talking about.
Yeah, we're in the right building.
Exactly,
the physics building.
We sure are. If you could go back to the April of 5 or even 10 years ago, cliched question aside, what would you say? Is it go for it, you're on the right path? Is there anything you'd steer away from? Would you change anything?
No, I was on the right path. I didn't say to myself then, I want to be responsible for this and this and this. To me, it was just being very interested in steering the IT space within a university, and not necessarily say, I want to be the associate director of X. And I have been opportunistic in my career, and, would say sometimes, I spent many years in security and in cyber, But I after 8 years of that, I wanted to switch to multimedia. So it was then looking for opportunities there, and within a university that opens up more opportunities. And they were pulling together the original centralized distributed learning system. Did I just say centralized distributed? Anyways. At RMIT. And then it was like, let's join this group and work with the university to see what they want for everything from online learning, all across the board to all the future of learning. So that was really exciting. But yes, I suppose I have been opportunistic when something comes up. It's like, well, I've done infrastructure, I've done applications, so I can help you with the next phase of that.
What do you think drives that opportunism? Is that people talk about a passion a lot, I think too much maybe, in the workplace these days. What's your passion? The business needs to find its passion, which is, again, itself becoming cliche now. But I believe that there is that in all of us. If we're not doing something that we inherently believe in or have a vision for, then how can we be expected to achieve anything in that space if you're just filling a seat and doing a job? This seems obviously like more than a job to you. So is there a degree of altruism in there, in enhancing an environment or making people's lives better? Or is it specifically about the fun of the technology for you?
It's everything.
Right.
Because, universities, as in any large organization, presents very large problems. And I love that.
Right. So you're a problem solver.
Definitely a problem solver. And very keen to move a university from A to B. So whether it's where we are now with technology, where we need to be, and many times we don't know where we need to be. So it's working out, where do we need to be? What is coming up in audiovisual?
How does one go about that? That fascinates me. I mean, I'm lucky enough to work with what I would certainly call a visionary in Paul Yachichi, who's our CEO and founder. And I've heard him referred to as that by other people as well. It certainly sounds like you are at the same level of thinking, to try to see what's coming next.
No,
although you may not refer to yourself as well.
No, I never would. But I suppose the way I tend to work is I partner with a visionary, whether it's an external company or an internal person. In this case, we have Kevin Knox, the manager of learning space technology. He is the technical visionary. And he also goes out into industry and sees what is happening and is talking to everyone and working out. And then in his own mind, what are the forward, what is the forward-moving path or the forward path we should move along in this space. My work that I do in the space is, first of all, understanding, is this the right place? Do we need to move in that direction? And then how can we fund it? How can we get people interested? And, because there's many things vying for budget in a university. So it is, how do we fund it? How do we get people interested? How do we get the academics interested in a remote support, for example? So that's what I find fascinating. And then it's like, how do we make this huge shift? Because where we were in just having enough funding to scrape by to upgrade a few rooms every year, to where we are now and able to move down a path that we're moving down, it has been an enormous undertaking.
So where do you think that imbalance of budget allocation was derived? Because we're obviously sitting in a very expensive campus. What was the disparity or the I guess the gap in thinking from? It seems to have changed now, shifted slightly into a greater understanding by whoever the powers that be are, that budget needs to be allocated differently.
Because the budget was allocated to the campus for a very long time, as you can see from the magnificent buildings here. But then underneath it, there really was not significant budget allocated to IT.
And what's your understanding of why do you think that was? Was it a lack of the understanding of the vision or what was coming or what was needed right now, or a fear of technology?
No, I'm not so sure about the fear of technology, but having...
Fear of the cost of technology.
Fear of the cost, and having the IT team systematically say, we need this, this, and this. Now, so while I was looking for more funding in the AV space, ITS as a whole was working on the digital master plan.
Right.
And pulling together a really comprehensive plan with a lot of input from the university. And it was, again, opportunistic because we were ready with what we wanted to do in AV. And so we were able to, situate ourselves nicely. After that, the university put together a learning and teaching strategy.
Of course.
And they basically came to us and said, okay, let's talk about where we could be with the teaching spaces, what we could be doing. So again, had that opportunity to partner with the university and pull together the learning and teaching, a component of the learning and teaching strategy that was dedicated to these magnificent spaces and ensuring that staff had the right technology to teach.
That's fascinating. So that it sounds almost like you've become, you've shifted from being, I don't want to say an afterthought, but a subsidiary almost to what you would say an afterthought,
Definitely.
a strong word. So an afterthought to an integral part of the strategy, to the learning teaching strategy.
And that goes back to that story I was telling you earlier of my first time I arrived on campus, and I was going to meet the CIO and have a chat. And, on the one side, there was this magnificent medical research building. I can't imagine how much it cost, but gorgeous. And then IT was situated in the afterthought of just this tiny little transportable or demountable, they call it, which was very transportable, straight to the tip. But it was all that was used by the gardeners at one point, I'm led to believe. And this is where IT was.
Wow.
And I was shocked, to say the least. But that was the start. That particular CIO was the start. That's the person that started to get the budget starting to flow into IT, and then move them into the proper location where staff could work without worrying about the possums in the ceiling and the roof leaking on them. And then it just sort of went from there. But I think ITS had to be in a position to know what they needed by talking to the university and getting that broad understanding, and at the same time that groundswell of support and senior leadership. Who is very, who were teaching and very interested in technology.
So I've got a question and then probably a follow-up question, depending on the answer. From my very recent experience, just again being fresh into AV, certainly in the education sector, it seems almost 50-50 where organizations are still either have a separate AV and IT team. I mean, we at Innomate, we talk about AV as IT, AV as IT all the time. We're a SaaS platform fundamentally. It's just inherent to us, but we still seem to have conversations where there are two separate teams, almost at odds daily, still battling. But that's not the case everywhere. What's the situation at ANU?
When I first came to ANU, and I had the application side and I had audiovisual, people would say, what? This doesn't make any sense. IT, AV, and I said, no, it makes perfect sense, because at the time AV was, was very separate, but it did need to come together, and those two areas were coming together. But the thinking, if you keep one side in a traditional AV team with a traditional AV mentality, you won't get the benefits. So, unified communication was coming in, and then the next minute we're having Zoom and Teams and integrate it with teaching, especially over COVID.
Yeah.
But as we moved to a more net-centric approach that we're moving with UXT and with Innomate, as we go to that cloud-based artificial intelligence, datification, the whole lot takes a very different mindset. So you can't have I have AV in one room, and if it breaks there, I'll send somebody out to fix it. Somebody will give me a telephone call, to everything is network based. everything is, there's a large application allowing us to do the remote support. And then when the problems occur, they're different than they were before. So you might have a problem that's systematically working its way through the university, going from room to room to room, which is quite different. You never did that before. It was like contained inside large lecterns that were very noisy and generated a lot of heat while the academics taught behind it. So it's really important to have somebody with the capability of thinking on both sides. And that's another thing that I brought to this space. And even to this day, like the problem solving, problems are new. Each time there's like a large problem. And so I bring the IT approach for problem solving that we've been running for years, and the IT approach for release management, and more vital, because now it's, the two sides are coming together, but there's still a lot of people who will think one way or I think another.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you've gone from, network encroachment from AV to almost domination. There is... Yes. The network is the devices now. It's AV device domination. And
That's right.
As I suspected might happen, you actually answered my leading question, because I was going to ask a follow-on to say, so do you think your IT background has been almost an unfair advantage in getting ahead of what needed to be done here? And it sounds very much like that was the case.
Oh, very much. And also my background in cyber security. For sure. Because once you have devices on the network, you have to make sure that they're secure. And once you have a back in a mesh in the cloud, you have to make sure that that is secure from the cloud all the way into the university. Otherwise, you let the gremlins in.
Absolutely. If we talk highs and lows, was there ever a time when you just wanted to, particularly thinking about the work you've done here at ANU, where you just want to throw your hands in the air and say, no, it's too hard. You don't strike me as that sort of person, for one. But was there ever a moment when you thought, is this even possible? Can we achieve this?
No, because there's always a solution to the problem.
The problem solver in you again.
Yeah, and if you know where you want to go, you may not be able to do it today. You may not have the support today. But I'll tell you a story of once when I was at another university and I ran infrastructure there. And it was a 40-plus degree day, and the chillers in the data center melted down. Oh. So the data center was like slowly or quickly shutting down. And our telephony provider also was struggling with the heat. So mobile phones in Melbourne were not working. And we were just rolling out a new telephony system within the university, and so we had the telephony system just running out of one data center at the moment while we were testing it. So just within ITS, I couldn't place calls within ITS, and I couldn't do anything. So it was, like, what do you do? And I was responsible for all of it.
Wow.
So, marched down the hall, commandeered an office that was close to the data center and had an open window, and then had this roster of staff that, because it was too hot to be outside for any length of time, roster of staff and a lot of water to move the information around,
Wow.
because it just needed that level of support. So, I thrive on difficult problems. Yeah. So, but it is frustrating as well to have a difficult problem and know that you need to get from A to B, but you're going to need a lot of money, or you're going to need a different staffing component, or you might need something that doesn't quite exist yet in terms of the technology.
So do you find you operate better when because I'm keen to learn more about, specifically about you and your character type in achieving the things that you've achieved here. Do you find, therefore, that you work better when you are surrounded by other problem solvers, or when you are surrounded by a team of maybe subject matter experts that can take direction, for example? What's the dynamic that you're the most comfortable in to get through these challenges?
Well, it's a combination, because I am the ultimate introvert.
Right.
So, I need time to process, and I think by writing. But it's also, if the problem is such that I can't see all the edges of it, and I can't see all the edges of the solution, then I look for, or I don't have time to work it all through, then I do look for a partner who can come in, whether that's an organization or a person. So we had the technology vision happening with Kevin Knox, and then we had myself looking at the university thinking, how do we get from a budget that's this big to a budget that's this big? And how do we get, from here to here? And how do we get funding diverted? And then, and in that case, I would bring in somebody who can help us, who's used to universities, didn't necessarily have to know about AV or learning space technology, but just, again, really good thinkers and could think outside the box, because that's really important when you're making a change like this. You have to be able to sell it, and you have to be able to think outside.
That's interesting as well to hear you say, that you didn't specifically think you needed somebody from AV, but somebody that understands universities. I've heard the opposite from a few people, and I tend to agree with your approach. You can train or teach somebody or help them learn and grow on the job, as it were, the AV ins and outs. But if you understand the fundamentals of why you're needing to implement the things you're implementing, surely that's more advantageous than having an AV expert come into an entirely alien environment.
And look, Kevin was providing all that research and the visionary work and the strategy around the technology and working, with UXT and so on. But it's one thing to have we know what we want to do, and then another thing to take something that's highly technical and may not even exist and convince the university to invest in it. So the other companies couldn't have come in and done what we were doing internally with the vision. But they certainly could come in and say, okay, let's look at these various things. Let's look at ITIL. Let's look at this. This is what's going well. Let's do journey mapping. And this is going well. This is not going well. Here are your gaps. And this is what you need to do. And then we would say the vision, with the vision, we will be able to do all these other things. We'll be able to support the spaces remotely. We will be able to do our upgrades in seconds and not months, and the whole list of things that we implement.
Phenomenal change.
Yeah.
Looking back to how you've got to this point, another area I'm always interested in is the people around people. So I've been very lucky to have probably 3 good mentors now who have also been my direct boss, which I believe doesn't happen that often. I'm just very lucky to have 3 individuals who've been my direct superior, but also mentors that I've kept to today. Is there anyone like that in your life, or is it more you being that person to other people?
Oh no, I've found, whether it's accidentally on purpose, that I hook up my wagon to people who are progressive and thinking and forward thinking, and also taking the time to sort of bring people along on a journey. And I've noticed that pattern, even if I didn't know it at the time.
Right.
I see that pattern. So whether somebody is actually sitting down and problem solving with me, or providing the money to bring in the people to problem solve, and then reflecting. But every single person that I have worked for has certainly provided some of that, or that. But obviously you're not going to be. You don't need that all the time. But I think just allowing me to think and maybe take a different path, because sometimes my solutions are not a run-of-the-mill, or my approach to it is not a run-of-the-mill approach. So giving me the space, the resources, and the confidence to progress with that.
Yeah, that sounds like some strong leadership traits that you're explaining there as well, or describing.
Yeah, definitely. And also for a CIO, like our current CIO here, Jonathan Churchill, when he came into the university, we set up a demonstration of what we were wanting to do, or what we are in the process of doing, and we had it set up in a number of rooms, and showed him the concept and the idea, but also spoke about the level of investment it was going to require, and again, to have somebody who's immediately on board and excited about the idea.
Excitement's good, yeah.
Excitement is so important. And then to be, supportive. And then it becomes a part of their dialogue with the university.
Sure.
And it just blossoms from there.
Do you, again, so my personal experience is in the mentors I just mentioned that I've been fortunate enough to have, or maybe, like you said, I've subconsciously sought them out in my life.
Yeah.
They are now, in retrospect, again to your point, I see now that they are very similar character types, and natural leaders who don't want to be leaders. They don't ask for it, but they are.
Yes.
And you hear this talked about in military context all the time, that often the best leaders are those who don't seek out that leadership, but they find themselves in it anyway. So these guys in my life have certainly been that, but also been open to challenge and direct conflict most of the time. And I've now become the sort of person who can't work in an environment that isn't open to a little bit of conflict and a little bit of a challenger mentality. So it sounds a little bit like that's the environment you've worked in.
Absolutely. And within a university, I mean, the people are here because they do challenge. That's what all the thinkers are doing here. So, and it then becomes a part of the daily life. So if you present, you know that people will challenge you and will want to get to the bottom of the thinking.
Yeah.
And
it's embedded culturally, I guess.
Yeah.
It's, I think we're both then in that case quite fortunate, because I hear some stories of the exact opposite in the commercial world. So maybe academia it's inherent to a degree because of the nature of it.
Yeah, and also we have a very good executive leadership team within ITS as well as outside ITS.
Yeah.
And within ITS, we're supportive of each other's ideas. We will challenge them as well. And I remember when I was, over a period of a number of weeks, I was arguing for a segment of the digital master plan funding, and it was very intense. And they would say, "Oh, can you just reduce that down to that level?" And then I had to know, like, at every cost point, what it would mean for the university. And so if you can get through one of our internal briefings and response, you can go anywhere in the university. Because although we're all supportive, we're also very focused on ensuring that the approach is going to be good for the university as well.
We've talked a little bit about the incredible journey that's gone on here and the influences around and some of the characters that have gone in to support what's been done here. What sort of a role has Innomate or UXT and Innomate played in that journey so far?
A significant role. The UXT and Innomate journey has been a very supportive and collaborative journey that started at a time when I'll never forget the time. It was, we had a huge number of support incidents that were unresolved and unresolvable because of a number of factors, including the rate they were coming in, the age of the equipment. So they were just, there was more and more incidents coming in. And so we asked for support to support our team. And I remember when UXT came in, there was 261 open tickets.
Wow.
And it was just before the start of semester.
Yeah.
So it was huge. And so we worked closely together, and they took off and running, just like, how do we get through these 261 tickets? And just worked consistently, until we gone from 261, and then the next minute we're down to 60, and then these are like harder tickets, and then we're down to 20 of the really, really, really difficult tickets, and then we were able to remove them all. But it was terrific, and over time they took over that whole service. So it was great. What we did was, we don't look after all the rooms, although we will now going forward. So we were able to say, okay, these 330 rooms, they will get this Rolls-Royce treatment. They will have this support. They will have a high quality of uplift, and at the same time have a dialogue with the university around, well, the other rooms and what is required in these spaces. But we were able to then, focus on a very large subset of key, mainly lecture theatres like this, but also significant meeting spaces like where our council meets.
Indeed.
So so we went from support, and I'll just go back to or continue on the support side. So over time, one of the big problems the service desk faced was, there's nothing worse for the service desk and also for the academic when somebody is in front of 1,200 students. And
worst case scenario,
and the equipment fails. So the person who takes the call gets the brunt of that, and the person who is in front of the students, who can in the next survey just totally, give them a very bad ranking that will, harm their career. So it's high pressure. So one of the things we did was we asked UXT to establish a telephony center that was staffed with engineers, and engineers that knew the university, engineers that had access to Innomate and the remote support. So they could, from wherever they were located, and we kept it in country. So from Sydney, they could then be supporting us remotely, and not only taking the calls, but being able to answer the calls. So we had a call go through to our service desk, and they said, the document camera's not working. And the person said, oh, is that an Apple phone or a Google phone? And, it just... that one got escalated.
What version are you running?
Yeah, exactly. And that we needed people on the other end who understood what a document camera was and what could go wrong. And all of our rooms are different. We're standardizing. There's a lot of old equipment out there. In one room, there was even a tape recorder.
Wow.
With a microphone attached to it, and somebody did ask for it to be integrated with our lecture capture system, which wasn't quite something we're able to do, but we're able to provide another solution.
It's a soft no.
Yeah, very soft no.
I love that.
Yeah. So, and then we also went on to do priority lecture support, because when the colleges came back after being away for COVID, it was then everyone's back on campus and they haven't taught in a classroom. Some people not for 2 years because of the various times Canberra was closed and other cities were closed and so on. So we established priority lecture support, where again UXT partnered with us, and we also drew in other support people. So we could have people who were able to do the difficult problem solving, people who were able to just be present in a building if somebody needed a bit of at-elbow support. Oh, yes, I haven't taught here in 3 years, and just remind me, how do I do this? And so we would bump our numbers right up for the first 4 weeks, and just surround the staff with this beautiful support, so they always felt like they were number one in terms of, if they needed help, we were there, and UXT was there to help them.
Again, in retrospect, it seems obvious that that's what we should do.
Yeah.
But, coming back to the visionary piece, that was new as a process.
Yeah, and again, I was going over a number of complaints that had come in. I was sitting with my boss, and, we were talking about, well, how are we going to do this? And, he actually said, well, what about... we set up a telephony center that just has these skilled people, or, it comes into, wherever these people are. So, we stood that up in very short order.
Yeah.
It was very quick.
I'm fortunate to sit very close to the guys that do that. So, it's how I've learnt, I think, as quickly as I have, although I've got a long way to go. The problems that are faced by a facility such as this, and it's good now just hearing how fast they're resolved as well. You wanted to, I think, expand on that.
So one of the opportunities that we can explore as we not only through adding the cloud and so on. But as we systematically go through and standardize all the spaces here, is bring in better capability for accessibility. Because we have our students who maybe English isn't their first language, and we have staff who are blind and still teach in a classroom. So I mean, wouldn't it be great again just to walk in and the classroom knows who it is, and everything just gets set up. And with students and staff who have hearing aids, again, there's different types and different ways of supporting, but this can only get better and better. And there's different points of view in the university as to whether a lecture will be automatically transcribed for students or not, and it depends on a whole raft of things. And but again, putting that in the hands of the students with the technology, and then they can have their transcriptions or not. This is such an important place, and again, the standardization of the space and of learning space technology again allows us to really support everyone.
Yeah, it feels like you have made enough change now to get to the point where the next stages or the next phases of change should be easier. They feel like smaller step changes now or improvements, talking about accessibility. One thing I was talking about with somebody else recently was, the I guess understanding and acknowledgement of neurodiversity now as well in the workplace. Finally we can accept that not everybody can learn the same way. Even in a physical environment. From temperature to light, to noise levels, we can cater for everybody now, whether it's physically in a room or remotely in a different way. It feels like the work that you've done in a task like this has got us to the point where we can now go, okay, we can include this and we can include this.
Well, that's right, because neurodiversity superpower brings with it sensitivities, as you were saying. Yeah, and
I feel like you're well set up for that. Is that a thing that's being discussed in a learning environment?
Oh, absolutely. Because the university has a disability action plan, and they've just reinvigorated it. And I was asked to lead that, which was such an honor. And just looking at it not only from IT's perspective, but from everything from our campus to teaching to students applying for special consideration, even that process is, 26 separate steps and different people to talk to. So being able to draw that in and draw that together, and the university is very, very, very focused on that.
Has anything surprised you about that? Have you discovered anything through that work so far where you thought, oh, wow, this is something that is, fairly huge that we hadn't considered? Or has it been a while since you've been surprised in transformation?
I suppose one surprise, which wasn't around the technology, but when we were holding the meetings, one person in particular with neurodiverse challenges would say, well, we needed to pause after every 10 minutes of the meeting and just stop. And everyone loved it. Right. Because I could just sort of think, well, what's my next question? Just that surprised me.
Not everyone can do 2 hours in a lecture theatre, right?
Yeah. And then the students saying, well, you all are used to working together, but we actually need a lesson or a course or something. And how do we participate on a board or on a committee? How do we have these discussions? Because when a decision is made, it's sometimes like, well, we can't do that, or we'll take that on notice. It's not. It's not like yes, you can have that today. You can have that glass of water. Some things can take years to work through. Some things months. Some things days, and some things we just have to. It doesn't end up where we want it to be, but it's just, it's an ongoing thing. Whereas a student, has a course, and it's like beginning and an end. And it's not as finite working in a university. And something that gets rejected today can still come back.
For sure, yeah. So we talked a fair bit earlier about your nature as a problem solver. This is a fairly broad spectrum question. If you were to get the opportunity to solve any of the world's problems, you name it, world hunger, big thinking, is there something that you would just absolutely love to go and try and solve?
Oh gosh, so many big problems.
I know it's probably more going to be a case of, can we narrow them down, please, to your top three? But
global warming, I mean, that's
really okay. Yeah,
that's really making a big impact,
isn't it? Just
yeah. And when you see governments that don't wish to acknowledge it,
for very obvious reasons as well, without getting too political.
For very obvious reasons. But you watch things like wineries creeping south. And going into the cooler climates, but the cooler climates, they have to move, in a more southerly direction to find them, and then, so I think that is the important place to be. Well, one of the many important places.
I tend to agree.
The area that because the university does do a lot of work around sustainability, but it's the disability and leveling the playing field, so everyone has a great opportunity. That's where I like to make my difference. That's my passion area. That sort of sits outside of. I mean, there's a component within IT and a component that's outside, and just driving, the ongoing conversation and thinking on that. That's my inside the university and also outside the university. I look for opportunities outside as well.
So speaking of those opportunities, what do you think will be the next path for you? Do you have...
For me?
Yeah, do you have goals? I mean,
yeah, I sure do.
Yeah.
I have a parallel life, and this is probably not for the world's consumption.
I'm sure it is.
So I have been quietly setting up a life in Mexico.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm actually stepping away shortly.
Oh, fantastic.
To start living that life and just stopping and reflecting, because there are a lot of things that I'd like to catch up on, like, the classical reading and, learning another language. And I have, things, responsibilities over there that I need to take care of. But just to step outside of things for a while and reflect and then determine what's next.
I like that. So that's not you haven't set yourself a boundary of time, a period of time where you go, okay, I'm going to give myself 2 years in Mexico, and then you're keeping that open and going to let serendipity take over?
Yeah, the next step or proposed time in Mexico is 6 months. And then, we'll then see,
I love
what.
That.
Because there's so many opportunities around the world.
But it doesn't feel like a job for you, like I said earlier.
No, it doesn't. But it is very intense because, the AVs are the only one side. We're learning space technology, and we have, the other side. And recently I've shifted to be the value stream lead for learning and teaching, because we're trying to align everything we're doing with the people who need it done. So rather than us sitting there thinking, what's next? We have the university staff and students telling us what's next.
Right. So it's a structured stream of work, right?
Yeah. And a different way of working, a more agile way of working.
I love that. So more problems to solve.
Always. It's never ending.
I've asked this of a few people recently. We go to sleep tonight and overnight, because it will happen overnight, I'm sure, if we live in a novel. An AI becomes sentient. We walk in here tomorrow and the Australian National University's AV network can speak to you. What's the first thing it says to you?
Good morning. What would you like to teach today?
I love that answer. I love that answer. I've had answers that range from please unplug me to please turn me off to get me out of here. But yeah, what would you like to teach today? So that takes us back to what we were talking about. Yeah. We're very close, I think, to actually getting to a world where that is true.
That's right. And, from the person who is teaching in the room and lecturing just to have everything working easily. And then we have a lot of people who are casual, not casual, but they're visiting lectures.
Yes, yeah.
And often there's nobody, you know, like they'll come in and they've taught once, somebody greeted them the first time, and they walk into a room second time. But again, to have everything that just turns on and is ready, and it all just works. It's all reliable. They'll never think, what if it doesn't work? Because that is one thing we should be able to just take the noise out of, and it just should all work beautifully.
Fantastic.
To a voice command.
To a voice command, yeah. Well, Dr. April Weiss, thank you very much for your time today. It's been fascinating for me personally, so I really do thank you for your time.
Thank you.